Audio test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Checking audio to the live feed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Audio test 1, 2, 3. Audio test 1, 2, 3. Once again, another audio check. Checking audio to the live feed. And I'll walk through the first part of the agenda, introductions, and then hand it over to our auditors.
Perfect. This meeting is being recorded. I was planning on calling on Marlene to introduce you, John. And then, is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
We're live.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. It is 2:04 p.m. My name is Vivian Malaulu, and I'm the current president of the Long Beach Community College District Board of Trustees. And you have tuned in to our audit subcommittee meeting. And we've got some guests that are online with us that will be able to share information. And just so you all know, we are able to have this meeting remotely thanks to the loosening of Brown Act guidelines as a result of the public health crisis. Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency back in March, which allows for this to happen. And now what I'd like to do is introduce our wonderful, outstanding Vice President, Marlene Drinkwine, who will introduce one of her team members, John Thompson, and they'll take it away from there. Thank you. Marlene?
Thank you so much, President Malaulu. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'd like to introduce our Director of Fiscal Services, John Thompson, to introduce our guests.
All right, thanks, President Malaulu and Marlene. And what I'd like to do, just go through and introduce all the participants, and you can say hi, or if you have a comment, that's great too. Thanks again to Board President Malaulu, and congratulations in November, confirmed for 4 more years with our board. So thank you for the past and future service. And speaking of past service, I'll introduce our other trustee on the subcommittee. He has served the district for 16 years, I believe, and this may be one of his last acts on the board. We'll certainly miss him, but thanks very much for all the great years. Welcome to Trustee Doug Otto. Hi, Doug. And next, our President Superintendent, who we're very lucky to have back with us for all her great experience with community colleges, and specifically Long Beach City College. Welcome to Luann Bynum.
Hello, everybody.
And our Deputy Director of Finance and Accounting, really the key player from the district's perspective on the audit. She's the liaison between the college and the auditors, Cindy Baker. Hi, Cindy. And on the audit team, we're very lucky to have a great team from Clifton Larson Allen. Our partner on the job is really an expert in local education agencies, especially community colleges, and that's Renee Graves.
Betty.
Hi, Renee. And next, senior manager on the audit is Heather McGee DeCower, and she's been on this audit several years and presented to the board for several years. Welcome, Heather.
Yeah.
And we also have Syed Farhan, a great experience with community colleges, especially financial aid. Hello, Syed.
Hello.
And last but not least, Ricardo Parra is the audit supervisor. He leads the audit on a day-to-day basis. So welcome, Ricardo.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, I'll just go through a couple items on the agenda. As Vivian mentioned, this is a public meeting. It's to the public in YouTube, and it's being recorded. Agenda item 1.2 is public comments. Board Secretary Hahn has emailed that she received no public comments, and our IT tech, Dario, checked our board public comments account and also noted that there were no public comments. So we'll proceed to section of the agenda 1.3, review and discussion of the audit reports. just a little note in that section is in accordance with Administrative Regulation 2013, and the Audit Subcommittee of the board will meet with the district independent auditors and other staff to review and discuss the draft copies of the district's annual audit reports. The audit subcommittee does not have authority or power to act on behalf of the board. The final audit report will be taken to the regular board of trustees meeting on December 21st. One of our auditors will present a brief presentation to the board at that meeting. And at this point, I'll hand it over and the auditors will present highlights of the audit reports, and our trustees are welcome to jump in with questions at any point. I'll hand it over to Heather.
Let me find my screen that I'm going to share. That is not the screen I wanted.
It looks like, Heather, is it the PowerPoint?
Is it the full screen?
No.
No, okay.
The one before was pretty close.
Okay, sorry about that. It's not coming through how it normally comes through. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. You probably have is it showing two different slides?
Just
Yeah,
one.
one slide.
Just one. Okay, then yeah, good. It's on the screen that I was hoping it would be on. Okay, thank you for that intercession. Thank you very much for the introduction, Tom, to my team members. You know, we meet with the audit committee at the beginning of the audit and at the end of the audit. And there's a lot that goes on in between, which gets summarized in a 1-hour meeting with you all. We've prepared a PowerPoint slide presentation, although today what we are delivering to the audit committee includes a governance letter. At the beginning of the audit, we meet with the audit committee and go through everything that we're going to report back at the end of the audit. And that specific letter includes all those required communication. Mainly the letter will go through and talk about estimates. It will discuss if we had any issues and if there's any audit adjustments. So there were no issues encountered or no disagreements you know, in coming to the conclusion of various areas, and there's no audit adjustments that are being provided this year. Also, what we're communicating today or presenting today is the audited financial statements. So that's of the entire district, their governmental funds, as well as their fiduciary funds. And then we have two other reports that are related to the Proposition 39 and the financial piece, as well as the performance audit piece. But what we're going to go through first is the district audit report. So the main reason why an audit is performed is so that somebody not associated with the organization can provide an opinion regarding the financial statements and whether they can be relied upon or not. The district has received an unmodified opinion. The language in the letter, when you look at it, it does not point out unmodified opinion. What it refers to is that the financial statements are presented fairly in material respects. And also what that means, most people like to hear the language that they've received a clean opinion. So the district does have an unmodified opinion, also known as a clean opinion. Following the opinion letter is the management's discussion and analysis. So this starts on page 4 and goes through pages 19. The MD&A is written by management. This gives management the opportunity to highlight the comparisons between last year's 2018-19 with 2019 and 20. The opinion is not included in or does not cover the management discussion and analysis. However, we do review it and provide some feedback to management for items that maybe they want to include, or but primarily we're reading it to make sure that it is consistent with the financial statements, and which it is. And within the audit report, there's actually 3 sets of financial statements. You have your governmental funds, your fiduciary funds, and then you have your other post-employment benefit plans. They all have very similar statements. The general fund, not the general fund, the governmental fund, including the statement of net position. This is kind of a balance sheet type snapshot, but for the financial statements, the district has multiple funds. They are all combined into one column for financial statements, as well as additional accruals that are applied that aren't required for the internal reporting requirement within the CCFS 311. The statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net positions. This is more of a snapshot of the activities, the revenue and expense activities for the fiscal year that has occurred. And then the governmental funds is the only fund that are only set of financials that does have a statement of cash flows. Statement of cash flows is more looking at the district on a cash basis. And then throughout the report, it is a lengthy report, so there are very different elements throughout. The notes to the financial statements go from pages 30 to 78. And really, this gives a little bit more insight about the organization, about the policies that the district follows, as well as additional information about what makes up the numbers that are in the financial statements. I always like to refer to the notes to the financial statements as really the financial statements would not be complete without these additional footnote disclosure requirements. Since the district since the district has net pension liability and they have other post-employment retirement benefit plan, there are some required supplemental information that covers the last 6 pages. The various schedules is referred to as required because the governmental accounting standards require that this information be included, as opposed to the supplemental information. Supplemental information is additional information that would be required through the Chancellor's office and additional information. The audit opinion is not the only opinion that's in the audit report. There's additional independent auditors reports, and they're broken into governmental accounting standards, uniform guidance, which is your federal compliance, as well as your state compliance. And then following that section, there is findings and question costs. So this is one of the key things that the audit committee would be mindful as if there is any findings that are to be communicated this year, in which there are no findings for those 3 areas, which would be the financial statements, federal, and state compliance. Now, there was an observation that was included in the financial statements last year, and there is a page that will give an update on the status of that, and that has been implemented. But there's nothing to disclose as far as findings for this year. And then the last 2 pages of the audit report does have continuing disclosure information. And throughout the report, we do communicate what new standards are on the horizon. And if you look at pages 75 through 77, there are a number of new standards. Actually, if you were to look at our presentation from last year, these standards would look familiar to you. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board had postponed the implementation of the 2 standards that are presented here. In working with management, the fiduciary activity will probably be the most significant change, where the majority interest most likely won't have a huge impact on the audit report. But we'll be working with management next year to make sure that those are implemented accordingly. Now, really, the slide presentation is just intended to kind of go through the different components of the financial statements. But we've hoped you had a chance to review that audit report. And if there's anything in the report that you would like to highlight, or if management would like us to refer to, we'd be happy to do that at this time.
I'm trying to unmute here. There you go.
Okay.
I do not have any questions, but does that complete the report? Because it seems awfully short this year.
Well, that's just the highlights of the
Got
report.
it.
So yeah, so that's why we wanted to go through the PowerPoint presentation slides. John, would you like us to go into a little bit deeper any of the specifics of the audit report? You know, a lot of things happened this year that, you know, even when we, you know, it gets a little challenging when you're doing Zoom presentations of audit report, especially the audit report of this size. You know, huge impact for the community colleges this year has been with COVID related funding and expenses. How about I bring up the audit report right now and we can look through those type of areas.
So yeah, I don't want to interrupt, and I don't want to jump the gun because I'm pretty sure that you're going to address it, but I would like to see some mention of how COVID has impacted the budget. And if you had any findings in your audit of areas where maybe we can reallocate some of the funding, or just kind of, you know, if perhaps with the CARES Act or other money coming into different areas, we can use other money from our budget in different departments. I don't really know the specifics, and I'm not super budget savvy, but I'd like to see how the any impact on the budget with the pandemic. I hope you understand my question better than I do.
Yeah,
certainly.
And I think a lot of it is probably going to be more relevant to your fiscal year 2021 than in 1920 because it was so late. But on that topic, it's kind of a good segue to mention that there is some testing that we have not been able to complete as of today's date. The Office of Management and Budget, they issue an audit guide every year that gives us the compliance areas that we need to look at. And they are in the process of issuing a supplement specifically related to HERF and the CARES Act and the testing that we need to do there. And I think it was promised to be issued in September and then October, and then it was supposed to be Monday. And we are sitting on pins and needles waiting to get that compliance supplement so we know what we will be looking at. So that'll probably give us some insight into what to look at better for next year in regard to the 2021. And I think that's what you'll see more of the impact on the budget. And shoot, the other observation I wanted to make as well is in regard to state compliance requirements. There was one new state compliance area that the Chancellor's Audit or the Chancellor's Office added to the district audit manual that we need to follow. And it was related to your student-centered funding formula and then internal controls regarding processes and procedures. So the Chancellor's Office had commissioned a study by a group by the name of FICMAT to look at districts and see how they're documenting the whole process of preparing the 311 and collecting data for FTEs, which then of course drives your student-centered funding formula. And what they found from that study is that a lot of information is really in individuals' heads or on their hard drives, that the people doing it know how to do the work, but there's not a lot of training, cross-training, documenting procedures. So when that person wins the lottery and decides I'm not coming to work anymore, those that would be left behind could potentially be scrambling to figure out how to do that reporting. So they had us look at how your district is sharing information, communicating, training, working together collaboratively, because it really does take a team to gather all that information. One person cannot do it all. And that requirement wasn't known until January of this year. So your district has done a really good job of pulling that information together. It wasn't necessarily in a formalized manual, if you will, but there was a lot of information that was pulled together. So you could see that those things were happening. There is information sharing, and there is processes and procedures that you can follow going forward. So that was our new compliance step. So we did not have any issues or any findings related to that.
And is the audit report up? Can somebody confirm? Right?
Yeah.
Am I sharing the audit report? Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, you're on
right.
the,
So as Renee had mentioned, right, the budget is going to, or the new funding is going to apply to the 2021 fiscal year. But we can point out in the audit report now what's showing on the financial statements. And it's kind of easy to point to. Oops, my highlight's getting a little bigger than I expected. Because this is reported, the funding received for HERF or for the CARES Act is reported as non-operating. Although the expenses are included above under operating, we can see that during the 2019-20, 6.5 million has been received in HERF funding. So that has been tested this year as a major program. If we look in the back of the financials, we do review that and test it as a major program. I'm gonna guess where we get to that page. I didn't guess as quickly as I thought. Here we go. Okay, so this is the summary of findings and question costs. And this is a nice page to refer to, as you can see what the opinions are for the financial statements as well as for federal awards. So as a major program for federal funds, we do test student financial aid, and we have tested the HERF and CARES Act funds. There have been no findings identified in either of those areas.
And just a little background on the CARES Act funding. We got different allocations, and part of that is for direct student aid. And that's most of the money that went out in the past fiscal year was getting aid to students as quickly as possible. And then there's allocation of that aid that's for institutional expenses related to the pandemic. And there's also, since Long Beach City College is the, for all of Southern California, the administrative district for small business development, there was also a small business development or SBDC allocation. As you can see on the page, Heather shows there's 6 million for that. And so different areas worked really hard to get that aid out in the case of small businesses, to small businesses that really needed help, to students, as I mentioned, that needed direct aid, and to reimburse for the PPE, the sanitization, the technology that was used to transition to remote education. Those kind of things were allowed with CARES Act funds.
I have a question. Sorry to interrupt. If someone wanted to see where this money went specifically, that information available. So for example, the institutional 7 million, where did that 7 million go on campus? And then if someone wanted to see the SBDC, the grants, could somebody, could anyone request that? Is that public information, or is there a website that has that?
On our website, we have posted the institutional. We're required to post periodic reports. And so there's a report as of September 30th that gives a breakdown. The audit report goes through June 30th. So these amounts that you see on this page are the entire allocation. So not all of those allocations are spent as of June 30th, or even as of right now. Some of them will carry over. I think there's still some direct student aid that's planned for the spring semester.
Right, and this is I just want to point out, this is the management discussion and analysis, and I thought it was a nice summary, which is why I turned the page to here. But this is actually for both years, right, John? What's been spent during 1920 and what's planned to be spent during 2021.
Oh, correct. Those are the allocation amounts. So what's been spent through June 30th in this audit report is just the 6 million that you mentioned. More of that has been spent as of today, and there's still some of those funds that will be spent going forward as well.
And if I may add that this does reflect the total allocation as has been mentioned. Each one of these pots of money has different expenditure requirements, including the dates by which the funds have to be spent. We don't anticipate having any unspent funds when those deadlines reach us, because we do have plenty of uses for these funds. And we are planning on an upcoming presentation to the board that talks about just that, the details of where these funds have been spent and the timing of them. And I think you already are aware of several of those individual items, like John mentioned, the PPE, supporting the students on campus, as well as things like providing faculty with stipends to prepare for remote instruction and other items along those lines. The list is long, how we've used these funds, and they are partially available online depending on the program, but we will provide the board with a full report about all the expenditures. But it does flow over the course of 2 different fiscal years. So we received much of the funds in 1920. We received additional funds, largely the block grant from the state in 2021. And the deadline for expenditures for all these programs is in 2021.
Can I ask a quick question? How are decisions made as to where the PPE and faculty stipend type funds, I don't necessarily mean to single those out. How are those made? What's the process?
Once we received the funds, part of those decisions were immediately apparent and obvious. Largely the PPE to support the on-campus sanitization and cleaning, and then the presence of essential personnel. And as we were able to shift to holding essential labs, the activities to support those that's necessary above and beyond what that on-campus lab would look like, as well as the transition to remote instruction. So they were largely made from a needs-based perspective, which fit in exactly with the requirements for the program. There are very specific expenditure requirements for all of these funds. Obviously, we could not use these funds for regular ongoing activities. They had to be activities above and beyond what we normally would engage in that directly serve our ability to provide instruction during COVID. And so with those restrictions.
Yeah, I was Trustee Otto also, this was all discussed at the executive cabinet level too, as needs came up and funding was identified. We would prioritize that and walk through what the funding is and review the money as we went along as well.
And eventually, do those funds become part of the review of those funds become part of the 2021 audit, or are they? I just don't know.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So, we will also review the 2020 expenditures as well,
Great.
Part of this year's audit.
Okay, good. I'm just curious.
They're part of the audit for the fiscal year in which they were spent.
Right, right. But we can't do them. I mean, this crazy stuff, the way that the monies have come in and needed to be spent right away to meet needs. But ultimately, there's some accounting that's made of how they were spent. It's fine, great. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
I will also add that in addition to our own audit as being shared with you today, they are always subject for audit by the Department of Education.
Got it.
And there's restrictions to some of these funds. We thought we could apply from March to June. We provided our essential employees with 5% differential pay, and unfortunately the CARES Act does not cover that. So it's provided, but just from unrestricted funds.
Okay. So we kind of went through the different components of the financial statements. We've looked at how the COVID funds have been spent during the year and how that affects the audit. It's not as much detailed as, but I think resources for seeing how that's been spent has been provided. Couple of things to point out this year. There is no new standards that have been applied to the financial statements. However, I do want to point your direction to the bond disclosure, because as you know, there was a refunding that was done this year as well as an issuance. So I just want to point out that the bond schedules have been reflected and updated to demonstrate that refunding and continuation of the program. That covers several pages. Also, extensive footnote disclosure in the financial statements have to do with the post-employment healthcare. So that's continuing to be disclosed, as well as with the employee retirement plan, specifically the STRS and the PERS. But other than COVID, kind of a usual year from an accounting standpoint.
Heather, do you want to
Just
maybe...
a little pandemic going on.
Yeah, just a little pandemic. Everything's good. Everything's
right.
fine.
Everything just kind of falls into place. And not to make light of the pandemic. I don't want anyone who might be tuning in the public to feel like we're making light of the pandemic. It is a serious issue, but all things considered, in looking at these numbers, I think that we've done really well. I'm concerned because I don't know, with our enrollment being down, I'm concerned with what's going to happen for the next budget and the next audit. I'm a little bit worried about that, because I don't think any of us could have anticipated the hardship that some of our students are facing in terms of just basic, being able to log on to Zoom or keeping a job. I've actually spoken to some students recently who have lost their jobs because they work in the restaurant industry. So they're not able to provide for themselves or their family at this time. And I'm afraid that their education will take a back seat to that, which, is a priority. Living is a priority.
Yeah, it's an unusual time. Usually in a recession, we get more students that are out of work and come to college because they, or have time available and they want to improve themselves. But it's a challenging time because, of course, everyone has to adapt to learning online, and it's a challenging transition.
Can you guys tell me the Gatsby 84 and 90 have been postponed, and it postponed until when? And could you, I don't have them in front of me. Can you refresh me as to what 84 and 90 were or are?
Certainly. So 84 is the fiduciary fund, and what we'll need to do is work with management in, just reevaluating those fiduciary funds that are presented in the financial statements. There's always a flow chart to go through and a decision tree to go through. So we'll share that decision tree with management, and it'll probably just, if there's any changes, it'll shift it from being in its own statement as opposed to being presented with the governmental funds. But so that's the change in presentation. We started looking at it a little bit this year, and I'm thinking for your district there might not be a significant change, but we'll know that for sure next year when we go through that decision tree. And actually there's multiple new standards, and but really those are the two that are on the horizon.
And I know 84 is the fiduciary funds, 90 is which is what?
there we go, majority interest.
Okay.
So if there's a legal separate organization, it's the age-old component unit evaluation. I know you've been on the board for a long time and you've probably heard us come to you and talk about, oh, there's a GASB on the component unit. So this is just another component unit type evaluation to the new standard. And really, you know, what the purpose of the standard is just to make sure that all the entities that should be included in the district's financial statements are included.
And my last question that I have so far is, I know that we had financial aid issues a little while back, and I think we got those cleaned up. And I'm glad to hear that our financial aid auditing was clean this year. And can you talk about the change, or how we did that and how it and what that is?
Yes, so looking back to fiscal year 2018, that's when I first had the opportunity to serve the district and involve overseeing the student financial aid audit. And from there till now, it's a huge difference in terms of the responsiveness of the way we're receiving our documents. Yvonne and Jason have been very helpful with facilitating the audit, responding to our emails, our concerns, questions, and even submitting our documents in such a way that it just makes it really easy for us to audit. So it's been a huge difference that and really helped us be really efficient with the audit process with student financial aid. And also, and their expertise is it seems like they're very competent in terms of what they're doing and their skill sets. So.
And if I could piggyback on that just a little bit, and everything that Saeed indicated is right on point. But the financial aid area it's a very complex audit area. So laws and regulations are changing on a constant basis. And some of the things that your team is tasked to do is pretty monumental. I mean, there's reporting that they have to do within 5 days, 10 days, 30 days, 45 days. I mean, there's constant things that they're following up on. So the chances that an item that we're required to look at may slip through the cracks and a finding may arise in the future, that's a very likely scenario. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything that Saeed just indicated that still is not happening. It's just, you know, we're humans and errors get made and things like that. So I just kind of want to put it in that perspective, that it is very likely that sometime, you know, in the future, you may have another financial aid finding pop up. But, you know, the team is really, I mean, they do know their stuff. When we have an issue that we think might potentially be a finding, I mean, they respond to it immediately and start researching it and, you know, seeing if there's some alternatives that we can apply. And if we ever get to the point when there is a finding, I mean, they are very responsive to the corrective action plan, which we really do appreciate.
It's my understanding that back in 2018, when we did have a significant issue, that we've worked really, really hard since then to improve our financial aid, the administration of financial aid, and that they've made great progress. And but we feel pretty comfortable where we are now with how we're doing it. And I know how complicated and complex it is, but it's not in the management letter to speak of. I don't have that in front of me either, but we've made great strides, it's my understanding, to make sure that area of what we do here, which is obviously very, very important, is significantly improved, and we don't see any real problems. Doesn't mean there can't be an issue, but we're doing it. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I may add, one of the things that we've done, Trustee Otto, and specifically what financial aid has done, is really improved their internal controls with the goal that we could self-identify when an issue occurs so that we could self-correct. And I think we've made a lot of progress, and the partnership between the financial aid team and the fiscal services team has greatly been strengthened, over that period of time. Again, with the goal that when we do have issues, we can self-identify them and self-correct them.
Great, thank you.
If I could add just another kind of gauge for financial aid, we're currently working on the accreditation, and one of the things they look at is the student loan default rate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a couple years old, but the improvement in our cohort loan default rate has been tremendous. It at one point was, I believe, over 28%, and now it's gone down to approximately 8%. So in the course of about 4 years, and they, I believe they've also worked with a consultant on this, but in the course of 8 years, that rate going down about 20% is just another measure of the great improvement in that area.
Oh, that's terrific and important. And I think with the upswing in the attractiveness of Pell Grants, that it's going to add another challenge to how we do it, not only in terms of implementing it, but reporting. If we, if there's a national policy that's what we're going to try and do more of that. So it's good to be in a good position to add that arrow to our quiver.
Definitely. So one thing we haven't discussed is the timing of the federal compliance supplement. We were kind of hoping for a Thanksgiving surprise that when we returned from all of our holiday feasts that we would have the federal compliance supplement ready for us to wrap up the audit report. Unfortunately, that has not been updated, but we are monitoring that. The good news is that the district audit report is not being presented to the board till December 21st. So what could happen is the audit report will be dated today, December 1st, and the federal letter might have a different date, depending on if there's any significant changes to the financial statements. So I just want to point that out to you, that is something that it's kind of out of our control, it's out of the district's control. Everybody's playing the waiting game right now.
Is there an estimate about when that's going to come out, or I guess
yeah, I'm going to refer to Saeed. He's our federal compliance expert.
We've had notifications from the AICPA since September, stating that they were expecting the release of the addendum to the compliance supplement within a couple of weeks. So now we're in December, and the last update, which was November 16th, stated that it should be issued by the end of November. So I'm hoping it's going to be in a few days or so, maybe this week. I'm constantly looking at their website to see if it's been released. It will not only help us with the audit process, but also clear out some ambiguity as it relates to allowable expenditures and things like that, which will help management make the decisions needed when it comes to budgeting and appropriation of those funds.
So we've been auditing with anticipation what might be in there, and we're really hoping there's not a whole lot to wrap up, but just wanting to let you know that is one unfinished area, and that we will
one question, Saeed, that's not going to have any bearing on us, or we're not going to, get fined or be in default because of that discrepancy with the date, right? That lapse in date.
No, I think it should be fine. I don't think there's anything that precludes or triggers any non-compliance per se. And and the Chancellor's office also has a deadline of February 28th, and we're confident we will be able to meet that. So.
Okay. And I think everyone kind of understands too with COVID, people are working from home and the situation is difficult all the way around. Okay, thank you.
You're
Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, and that's why the chancellor's office had extended that deadline date for that exact reason. Yeah, it's just a matter of, oh, I know what I was gonna say. I drew a blank for a second. The date is important to on the audit's perspective, because that's our, the date that we date the audit report is when we consider management has taken responsibility for the financial statements. So since we don't know what's in the compliance supplement, we can't make that statement at this point. So that's where that's driving from. Otherwise, the report is dated as of December 1st.
Right, and so the approach we're taking is that the financial statements that we're presenting to you today, that those are solid. So the date on the financial statements could be today's date. The only thing that we can't complete as of today is compliance testing, because we don't have that audit guide yet. So potentially that could have a different date on it, but that is not uncommon with a single audit, because that's the single audit piece of the engagement. And, you know, it is acceptable actually to break them into two different reports, one report being your financial statement, one being the single audit piece. That typically is just not what has been done in the community college industry. So, and the chancellor's office, you know, gets the reports and they review them as well. So the chancellor's office preference is to keep it as one document. So that's why things are being kind of delayed a little bit for both your purposes and the chancellor's office as well. But we're keeping our fingers on the pulse. Like Saeed said, I think he wakes up every morning and looks at it, and then we all start emailing him. Is it out? Is it out? So, you know, we, based on everything that's available, you know, we've pulled our sample, we've looked at it. We don't believe there are going to be any issues based on what we know, but not knowing exactly what they want us to look at, we can't, you know, pull the trigger on finalizing the report until we know that piece. So that's kind of what we're waiting for. And real quick, I realized I need to retract something that I said, because the words came out of my mouth, and as soon as they came out, I'm like, wait a second, I think I'm saying this wrong. So when I was referring to the new state compliance step that we had to follow, and I think I made the statement that the district did not have a manual. And the minute I said it, I'm like, wait, no. Long Beach was actually our premier client in that you do have a wonderful document and a fully developed manual. So I was thinking of a different client. I had a cabinet meeting this morning and they did not have a manual. So I do apologize for making that misstatement. And your team was able to pull together a full manual of how all the FTEs and all the student-centered funding formula is, all that data is accumulated, reported, how it's checked and double-checked for accuracy. So I do want to make sure that I get that on record, that you do have a very nice manual on that.
They do. I didn't catch on to you saying that, Renee, because otherwise I told John that I was spoiled because I started with Long Beach and they had such a nice manual that when I went to the next client that didn't have a manual, I was not as spoiled.
The minute the words came out, I was like, wait, no, I'm wrong. So I was kind of, hopefully it wasn't noticeable. I was kind of looking it up real quick and go, yep, I was wrong. So I do apologize.
It's a good manual. So we do have two other reports to go through real quickly. They're not as large, so probably not as in-depth as the conversation, but just wanting to see if there was anything else in the district audit report anyone had questions on before moving on.
You know, real quick, Heather, do you want to maybe pull up the organization page with the new disclosure there?
Oh, sure.
Just so you can see it. So when you're going through the report, because I know that's the page a lot of people like to turn to and look at, and Heather is actually the most expert, I think, in the state on this issue. So if you want to share your thoughts here.
So the history and organization page isn't new to the district audit report, but the bottom section is new. And this was added as required by CDAM this year. The Chancellor's Office wanted to include what auxiliaries that the district considered to be in good standing. So Long Beach has two auxiliaries that they recognize as their own, and that would be the actual auxiliary, which used to run a bookstore and the food services, and now those two services are outsourced, but that organization still exists. And then the Long Beach City College Foundation. To me, it's just a nice place for because the Chancellor's Office was struggling with knowing what organizations were out there, and this is what this will help them with understanding that.
And just a note, we know we'll have a new board member at the December meeting, but the board, as you see it there, is as of June 30th, the date the audit report covers. So just to point that out.
So the associated student body used to do a number of things, but the main things that they did, the bookstore and I think they ran something else, those have been outsourced now. So do they have much activity left? I think they collect quite a bit of money.
The bookstore and the food service is outsourced, but it's still under the auxiliary, which gets revenue through the commission revenue for those services.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's a whole nother topic going forward. Of course, food services stopped and, you know, changes with the bookstore, but that's a whole separate topic.
And if I can clarify, this is the auxiliary, not the associated student body. But another thing we should mention that the auxiliary still pays for is we still have some outstanding retirement obligations related to the former employees of our bookstore. So for that reason alone, the auxiliary is necessary to continue to pay those obligations. But it does receive some revenues from the firms that now operate the bookstore as well as the cafeteria, and that those are used to both fund some positions as well as to provide grants that are available for faculty and students.
Good.
Okay. Do we have till 3 o'clock, or how long does the meeting go to?
I had 3:30 on my calendar. Is that
3:30.
okay?
Oh, okay. Oh, great. So I don't have to rush through. Give the Reader Digest version of it. Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions on the district audit report before we move on, now that I know we have 35 minutes? Okay. So Proposition 39. So the district has two measures that they're currently still have funds available to be spent, and those are included in the next two reports that we'll be looking through. So we do a financial audit. When Proposition 39 was passed back in 2000, it came with some stipulations that if the district were to pass a general obligation bond under this type of funding, that they would be required to have a financial audit specifically for those bond funds, as well as performance audits. The financial audit, similar to the district, it really is only just those two bond funds, but it has an opinion letter in which the bond funds have also received an unmodified audit opinion. Included in the financial statements are the various statements. So you have the balance sheet, which gives a snapshot at the end of the year, how much funds are still being held by those two different measures. Measure E, at a glance, there's only $132 in that fund, but that still is an active program. Certain promises were made to taxpayers that they would keep an eye on how much bonds would be issued per,
yeah,
John, what's
valuation.
Yeah, thank you.
Self-valuation, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
self-valuation.
it's valuation. And you know, really, we don't need, we have still 150 million authorized under Measure E, and you know, the original authorization for Measure LB was 850 million. So, you know, we don't need to issue from both funds. So, you know, at the current time and for the next several years, we'll just be issuing out of LB. And then in the future, we'll eventually issue the rest of Measure E.
Yes. But just wanting to point out that that is still an active bond program, but just strategically when those bonds will be issued. So for the current year, a majority of the expenditures or all the expenditures are going through Measure LB. So this is a summary of those various expenditures. And this goes kind of goes hand in hand with the performance audit, because that's the report where we get into a little more detail of what we tested and how we tested it. Also, footnote disclosures, giving a little bit more insight into the district, into the bond program, but also just pointing out that this audit report is not a representation of the district as a whole, that they would need to refer to the district audit report for that. But because of the nature of it, we do include the various bond debt disclosures. The debt for these measures are not reflected in this financial statements. Those are part of the district financial statements and with the governmental funds presentation. But because of the nature between the two, it makes sense to include them in the financial statements. Another important thing to point out as we're looking at the financial piece is if there were any audit adjustments or any findings related to the bond funds in which there were neither audit adjustment nor any findings.
Mm-hmm.
So the financial piece is kind of a short and sweet one, but I think the report between the two that I find really useful is the performance piece. So the financial piece lets the financial statement reader know how reliable the numbers are in the financial statements, where the performance that goes with you know, satisfying those requirements at Proposition 39 and looking really into detail of looking at the expenses and making sure that they were spent accordingly. So there is a difference between the two reports. Our opinion letter just has slightly different language if you were to compare the two. As I pointed out earlier, the language in a financial report is presented fairly in material respects, where in a performance report it's presented with insignificant respects that the funds were spent accordingly to the requirements of Proposition 39. So those are the key paragraphs that you're looking for when you're looking at an opinion letter in these two reports. The performance report has, you know, covers a couple of pages, but it gives like really important information. It has background information on the bond program, as well as what the objectives of the audit are. I think the page that everybody wants to turn to is looking at our procedures performed, because to get an idea of how much funds are being tested. So what we do is we break up our testing between two categories. We look at non-salary and benefit related expenses, and then we look at salary and benefits separately, because they have two different requirements. As we were looking at the financial statements, we saw that Measure E did not have any expenditures this year, but it's included in the performance piece and draws attention to no expenditures. With Measure LB, let's see if I can highlight it real quick. There we go. Okay, so we did test 83 non-salary expenditures for Measure LB, which accounts to $35.5 million or 66%. So when we're testing the performance piece, we are aiming for a higher percentage to have a reliance that everything is spent accordingly, but it is not 100% testing that's being done. For the salaries and benefits, 380,000. My highlighter's not working. Was spent on salaries and benefits. So what we do for salaries and benefits is really look at see who is being charged to those programs. So we're doing it more on an analysis type basis and making sure that those people are working directly with the bond programs. There's legal opinions out there that salaries should not include any administrators. So we have reviewed those salaries and benefits and have agreed that they were charged appropriately to the bond program. And then on the final page, we have the conclusion, which is similar to the audit report, basically saying that in significant respects that the expenditures were spent appropriately and that salaries and benefits were properly charged.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, in my preparation for this meeting, I contacted Rebecca Turrentine, who sits on the Citizen Oversight Committee, and asked her about how it was going. And she emailed me back and said, I have absolutely no concerns about the Citizens Oversight Committee and how the bond funds are being handled. Each report that is brought to us is thoroughly discussed by the committee, and many probing questions are asked of the administration. I believe that the committee as a whole has great confidence that the funds are being spent in accordance with the bond language and that the projects are well managed. Thanks for checking in with me. And as an added level of comfort, she has now been on the committee for about 4 years. She's the former superintendent of the Bellflower Unified School District, and her specialty was facilities. And so I value that opinion as well. So my confidence in what's going on there is very high.
Great. Yes, but those reports, we do look at those reports. Actually, some of them are summarized in the audit reports. And I showed districts the disclosure that Long Beach has because I think they're really good disclosures. These are not the typical or not required disclosures related to the performance piece, but I think it gives a good visual of how much funds are remaining for the bond program. So for Measure E, as John had indicated, they are not issuing at this time, but you can see there's 150,000 still remaining to be available in that program. And then LB's is still in the early stages. It was only issued in 2016, so 150 million was passed. There's still remaining funds of 738,000, as well as various schedules with the different projects that have been approved by the voters, as well as the Board of Trustees and the expenditures to date on those projects for both measures.
I think that everybody's been hypersensitive about how these programs go because of all the problems that they had in the Los Angeles community college district over the years. And so you get a lot more local scrutiny than you have historically because of the problems there, and in a couple other places in the state as well. But we feel I feel very confident that we're administering a very good program.
Any other questions about any three of the reports or the governance letter?
I would just mention for the administrators and trustees, obviously this meeting is where we go over the reports in detail. For the December 21st meeting, Heather's prepared to give a presentation like she's done in the past, which is about 15 minutes and going over the PowerPoint slides like she started this meeting. Is that plan still good with everyone? All right, we'll plan on that.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your time, and thank you, John and Cindy, and your teams for all your help in providing support. As you had mentioned at the beginning, during a pandemic, how the students are affected, it also affects how everybody does their jobs day to day. So we were able to do the audit entirely remote. The district does have systems in place where items are scanned and a laserfish type software that we were given access to. So that eased in that transition where other districts don't have those means at this time. So we'll select a sample and they're like, okay, we'll get it back to you in a week because we have to scan all these documents. So Cindy and her team do a great job. And as Renee had mentioned earlier, student financial aid is a very highly regulated area. So we do look at that closely, and the team is responsive if we have any concerns. You know, when we ask for additional information, we were able to resolve those concerns.
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you to all of you on the audit team, as well as to our internal team and Marlene. I think you guys do an excellent job, and I love the transparency of it. I'm just really proud of the fact that there's no findings. I'm proud of the fact that something of what we're doing is a good model for other institutions as well. I think it's great, Doug, that you got that response from one of our members of the COC. That was a question I was going to have. You know, how do they plug into this? And it's clear that they're fully engaged in the information that you take a look at. So thank you very much. I just wanted to tell you how much we appreciate it.
And the one comment that I would make is that I think there's an increased sensitivity of the public because of all the tax measures that have been passed and where we stand. Taxation laws in the state of California, in the city of Long Beach, about how the money is being spent. And we're going to expect more scrutiny. And therefore, we got to double down on making sure that it's accountable, it's accessible. And I think we do a great job of doing that. You know, once a month, I run into somebody who talks about all the great things that have happened at Long Beach City College at both the Pacific Coast and the liberal arts campus, and how they've been modernized, and the elliptical and all of that is always, and how was it done? And you know, I feel very confident that over the time that these bond measures have been passed, I think the first one was $175 million, and that was just before I came on the board. But since then, it's gone from 175 million to 1.2 billion. And we've got money left, but we're doing it in a very high quality way, and that everybody's very proud of the way that Long Beach City College handles this. And that message gets translated to the citizens out there who are paying for it.
Yeah, we all take a look at our tax bills that are due and see the allocations that go. It gives me great confidence as somebody in Long Beach to know that it's being administered and handled well, and that our audit team is doing their job really well also, you know. But
I would also like to say thank you too. I appreciate the time, and I know that there have been some difficulties with COVID, having to do so much of this remotely, but I'm happy to hear that everybody was cooperative and you found everything that you needed to conduct the audit. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the final presentation in December at the end of the month, and then hopefully it won't be too bad for next year.
Keep our fingers crossed. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
The recording has stopped.